Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome everybody. My name's Rufus. I'm the industry manager at Doc Edge. I run the Doc Pitch pitching forum and the Doc Edge forum industry conference during our festival, as well as selecting some of the films for our festival and running all these workshops. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to our guests for being here. And just to let everybody know, we are on a YouTube live stream. So hello to everybody watching. So we're here to talk about pitching and how to develop your pitches, how to develop your trailers, and hopefully get you all to submit your projects to Doc Pitch this year. So I'd just like to introduce Jazz Thornton.
Hi.
Jazz is a mental health advocate, a filmmaker, a campaigner, recent semi-finalist in Young New Zealander of the Year, and a close personal friend of Harry and Meghan. But I'll just ask Jazz to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rufus. Thanks so much for having me. It's really cool to be down here. I'm from Auckland, so flew down this morning. Very glad to get here. All the flights were cancelled to Nelson and stuff, so I'm really glad that I managed to come down. I pitched in 2017 with Doc Edge, but bit of background on me. I grew up in a tiny town in the South Island called Timaru. There's really nothing to do there at all. So when I was 16, I was like, I need to get out of here. I'd always had a passion for the media industry and for storytelling. And I decided, when I was 16, I had saved up money. I was working in a fish and chip shop at the time, which was ironic because I'm allergic to seafood. But I saved up and I flew up to Auckland, and life kind of, like Rufus said, I'm a mental health advocate, and that's for me because life kind of hit me real hard when I was younger, and I went through childhood abuse and multiple suicide attempts and a lot of mental health issues. And when I eventually came out the other end, I was like, okay, now it's time to try and live the dream that I once had when I was a kid, which was to be involved in media. And so I enrolled in South Seas Film and Television School at the beginning of 2017, having no idea what to expect at all. I was there just wanting to tell stories that mattered. I started a charity with a friend of mine called Voices of Hope in January of 2017, and the whole kind of idea was to create online video content and campaigns around mental health and suicide. And so I think it was about 1 month into Voices of Hope. Is it on the screen? Mean, fun. It's my face. About 1 month into doing Voices of Hope and into film school, I learned how to do an AV script, and I decided to create the first video for Voices of Hope. And the first video was a video called Dear Suicidal Me. And I was the thing that inspired it was that when I was in the psych ward a few years ago, I wrote a letter called Dear Suicidal Me, but it was to my future suicidal self, because I knew my pattern. I knew that this is what was going to happen. And so when I was out of it, I got 4 different people who had been in that same place, got them all to read out their suicide notes, and then got them all to write a letter called Dear Suicidal Me, this time to their past suicidal self. So we had Rob Makaraka, who's an actor. He was, Dear Suicidal Me, I know that right now it feels like you can't do it, but what you don't know is you're about to become an award-winning actor. You're going to travel the world, etc. And what we put that up online, and what happened next, we would have never expected. I woke up and that video was at 1 million views, and then it climbed very quickly to 5 million, then 10 million, and then 20 million. And now it's sitting at over 80 million views. We're shared internationally around the world. And kind of at that moment, I was like, hey, maybe I have a nick for this. Like maybe we can, start doing more. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I got to with enrolling with South Seas.
And as Jazz said, she was our 2017 Best Pitch Short winner. Gave an amazing pitch. Just floored everybody. I was in the room and floored everybody. But I guess I was just wondering if you could tell us, how did you hear about Doc Pitch? Did you have doubts about pitching?
Yeah, so I'd come up with this idea for my kind of final project for South Seas. This was in like end of term 1, so I was like way ahead of what I should have been doing, but I was like, this is the story I want to tell for my end of term project, which I think is like an 8-minute film. And my tutors were like, you should apply for Doc Edge to pitch this idea as like a web series. And I was like, okay. I had no idea. I hadn't really heard of Doc Edge before, and I didn't, know what to expect or what was going to go on. But I got in touch and I submitted this like application form, and they came back, and I was on the phone to Paula, who was running it back then, and she was like, okay, yep, so we're gonna you're gonna be in the pitch, this is what you need to do, you need to send this synopsis and these log lines. And I was like, okay. I honestly I don't know how many times I wanted to pull out going beforehand. I had so many doubts. I went onto the list of everyone who had won previously, and I looked at other pictures, and I was like, there is no way. I've been in film school for like 2 minutes. I don't know what I'm doing. And actually the night before, after I had, done all the workshops, which we'll talk about soon, I went up to my tutors, and we were in the middle of News Week, which is like a real busy week. And I was like, I can't do it. Like, I'm going to pull out. There's no way that I can do this. And my tutor literally just turned to me and was like, shut up. You need to go pitch. Just pull your head in and go. And I'm very, very thankful that she did.
And why was she so adamant?
I actually don't know. I think it's because she knew that this story was one worth telling, but none of us expected me to win. I was introduced as a student picture, kind of like, be nice. I was the youngest one in the room by far, the very least experienced by far. So no. When I rang them afterwards to say that I'd won, Kate was gobsmacked. She was like, oh, I didn't expect that. And I was like, well, thanks for aiming high for me.
And could you tell us a little bit about just doing the application and filling out the budget and writing the synopsis and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, my synopsis changed like 12 times. Because what I had originally had in my head for this idea was, this short video for South Seas. The longest thing I'd ever directed was Dear Suicidal Me, which was like 6 minutes. So doing anything longer than that, I was like, I don't know. But I remember filling out the application form, and it was actually quite easy to fill out, which was great because it kind of, took you through exactly what you needed to do. And then when I submitted the logline and the synopsis, they came back and were like, hey, we think that you should alter this a bit. Like, we need to go a lot more into detail and change the words of what you've said, because it's the first time I'd done it. But yeah, we went into the workshops after that. But the actual application process itself, I actually just did it sitting in the computer lab at South Seas. So yeah, it was great.
And so could you just tell us a little bit about the workshop you did with Paula? So Paula Jones used to run the Doc Pitch Forum a few years ago, and she ran a workshop with you?
Yeah, we did 2 actually. So there was a group of people who were pitching, and we all came together, and we basically, like, she decided to go through the one-liner, the synopsis with us, because that's what the panel see first. So they know what you're about to pitch, and that's kind of their first impression of you. And so we sat there, and that's where my synopsis changed to what ended up being my winning pitch. And we went through, I guess, kind of how to pitch, what is going to be expected of us, what the panel is going to expect of us. And then we paired up and we had to pitch our story ideas to each other. And I remember being with someone who had made a couple of features before, and I was like, like, she obviously knew what she was doing. But it was really, really helpful. I was terrified because I've never done this before. But that was so beneficial because I was able to pitch to her. And then she was like, okay, I need to know this about the story, and I don't quite understand that about the story. And what's your personal connection to it? Because I'd left myself out of it and why I was telling the story. Classic Kiwi, we don't want to talk about ourselves. But she was like, actually, this is a key part of your story. And so from that workshop, all of that stuff was integrated into my pitch. Yeah.
Great. And you were also mentored by Alex Reid. For those of you who don't know Alex, she's a Auckland-based producer. Quite experienced, very smart, Could you tell us a bit about how that came about and how that helped you?
Yeah, definitely. That actually came about because my tutor at South Seas was like, you probably want to get the backing of a producer before you go into this pitch. Like, you don't have to, but for someone your age, it's probably a good idea. And I've got this friend, her name's Alex. She's great. You should go and meet her. And so she set up a meeting with me to go meet Alex at her house. And I remember sitting outside for like half an hour, just like hyperventilating, being like, I don't know what to say to her. Because I'm trying to like pitch myself to her, right? Like, please come with me so that I can do like a semi-good job in this. And I ended up going in and she was great. She's produced Decades in Colour and a whole bunch of amazing shows. And
she used to work for Ken Loach in the UK as well.
Yes, yep. Yeah, she's fantastic. And she had told me about her personal connection to the subject matter of suicide. At that point, she hadn't decided that she would come on to the project, but she was like, okay, I'm going to be there for you on the day. We're going to, I'll help you with your pitch and we'll see where we'll go from there. And I met with her a couple of times beforehand, just kind of preparing. And on the actual pitch day, I remember I think like second to last. So I had the benefit of watching everyone else and listening to everyone else's comments from the panel. And I watched everyone with like these amazing big PowerPoints and like they had these like full sheets of what they were going to say. And I remember going to Alex and going, I need to change this. I don't think this is the right way to do it. So about 5 minutes before my pitch, we went outside, me and Alex, and we changed the structure of the entire thing. Now, the reason I could do that was because I knew my pitch and my story inside and out. So that meant that it didn't matter if I changed the full structure of it. I knew my story. I knew why I needed to tell it, and I had the passion of it. So it was easy to be able to change it. And yeah, so she was amazing. I ended up getting up onto the, where we were pitching. I had a piece of paper with like 3 bullet points written down, and that was about it. But she was amazing and like really kind of calmed me down.
Awesome. So this year, just for everybody here, like this year, we're going to have much more targeted and bespoke mentoring for our doc pitch finalists. So what Alex did with Jazz is going to be for all our pitches this year. So we're going to select the usual 10 or 15 finalists, and we're going to have 4 or 5 professional mentors, and they're going to be matched to the projects and the filmmakers, and it'll be about a 5-week development process to get your pitches like really compelling and engaging. So yeah, but we'll talk more about that in the second half. But maybe now's a good time to watch your pitch.
Pre-warning, I talk real fast when I'm nervous. Yeah. I watched this for the first time the other day and I was like, oh, that's fun.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to pitch like CIA. Still in film school, year 2. And I am also carrying on the morbid subject. And this one is called Silent Killer, which is based around the topic of suicide. What I'm pitching is a 7-episode web series, which is obviously about the topic of suicide. And I know that this is a hard subject and story to tell, but it's one that people my age want to talk about. You may have seen 13 Reasons Why, and we'll talk about that. It's something that teenagers, but everyone knows someone who suffered with it, struggled with this. The reason that I know that this is something people want to talk about is recently I directed a video called Dear Suicide and Me. And the video, bring up the second slide. Within 48 hours, was picked up by 7 News Australia, New Zealand Herald, Daily Telegraph, and Daily Mail UK, who all did big spreads on it. It is now sitting at 39 million views and it's been shared across the world as well. So this is something people want to talk about. So if we can play the video, this video is just an interview with the parents about the main character that is going to be in Silent Killer. It's not necessarily a trailer. It's just an interview I did with them last year to the site.
Jess was doing a early childhood education course. She'd completed level 3. She had plans to have a family.
7. She wanted seven children.
We said one at a time. The police got search and rescue involved, which was the first time that had happened. We were still positive, and yeah, okay, the police will find her. As they do, she'll be annoyed that she's been found. They'll bring her back. She'll be annoyed at us, and we'll do what we normally do. The search and rescue gentleman, he came in, and he said, "We think we've found her." Oh, that's great. Where is she? Well, she's she didn't make it. She's passed away. She's dead.
If I don't hear it, then it won't be real.
I asked the detective sergeant if we could see Jess, and so we all walked down. I just touched her. She was cold.
Jess and Amy James Lambert were 2 of over 400 parents last year that lost their teenagers to suicide. New Zealand has the highest teenage suicide statistic in the world per capita. Now, just to extend a little bit on that story, Jess, when she was a young girl, had a pretty normal life, but when she was 7 years old, her school report started to change. She was playing up in school, she was back chatting to her teachers, and it was later discovered that throughout those 7 years of her life, she had been horrifically abused. She was raped, she was chained to bed, she was locked in closets, she was drowned to the point where she couldn't breathe and had to come back up. Now, the way that we're going to tell this is, thankfully, Jess was a writer. She's got diaries full of every event that happened and everything that was going through her mind. So her best friend is going to be reading out that as we go into reenactments, as well as interviews with her parents, teachers, and peers. The purpose of this is that some of you from New Zealand may have heard recently a story about a young girl who was on the South motorway bridge, and she was trying to take her life. And so Stuff in New Zealand Herald, they covered this. The comment, if you go to the first slide, was something like this: "Someone go drag that mole back from the edge so traffic can get going. If she was serious, she would have done it by now. She just wants attention. Hopefully 50,000 volts worth is being arranged." The stigma around suicide and mental health is that you're attention seeking. I know that this is a hard story, but the reality is that our young people, they don't want to speak out because all that people see is statistics and numbers, not the stories behind it. The purpose of this is to change this stigma, to change that these people are not attention seeking, but there is reason and purpose to that, so that going forward, our young people feel like they can ask for help and they can speak out without this being cast upon them. And the reason that I believe that I'm the best person to tell the story is that my story is actually very similar to Jess's as well, so I know what it's like. Obviously, I am a young director. I know what it's like to grow up in this day and age with the abuse, the suicidal attempts, and tendencies as well. So I can not only relate in the way of how to tell the story, but also within the mindset of what it's like to be in that space as well. I feel like we can really do it justice. And people want to see change. People are willing to see change, clearly by the first video that went viral that we did. So my question is, how can we make that change?
Awesome. Yeah, well, as I said, I was in the room that day, and yeah, there was quite a few tears, and it was quite emotional, but it was an amazing pitch. Could you give us a little bit of history into like how the idea came about in the story?
Yeah. So the first video that you saw there with Jess's parents. So Jess was a girl that I'd mentored back in 2015, and I got to know her parents, and she unfortunately, she took her life. And I remember kind of what I said in that pitch, which is actually become quite a bigger story in the film that's getting made as well, which I'll talk about later, but is after seeing those comments of everyone being like, oh, if that was my daughter I'd shoot her down, like all of that kind of thing, seeing this problem motivated me to create or to try and think of something that could potentially create this change. And I already had a really great relationship with Jess's parents, and so they trusted me to tell her story and to tell their story. And I guess like what I wanted to tell for my final South Seas project. Like I said, I never expected to be able to do what it's now done, but yeah, it kind of, the whole idea of it came from a place of passion for me, of wanting to see change. And that's not saying, there was that particular day, I think I was the third morbid topic in a row. So the poor panel were like, and it was all the young ones that were doing it as well. But it's, it goes the same. I was doing a pitching workshop for South Seas last year, and I was talking about how, for me, it was the passion to see change that provoked me to do this project, which meant that had to come across in my pitch. But for people who are pitching like a comedic thing, then you need to pitch and it needs to be funny, right? I had someone that was pitching to me this comedy thing and it was not funny at all. And I was like, how do you think someone's going to fund this like comedic series if you're not like a portrayal of what you want to see on screen, or the story you want to tell?
So your pitch, your performance has to match the tone of the project.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and so my producers get annoyed at me. They say that tears are my heroine, and so I'm always like, did they cry? Did they cry? And so I wanted them to feel something. I wanted them to feel emotionally, connected to Jess and to the story. And that happened, thankfully.
Well, that's like that message of social change and social purpose is something that's very particular to documentary films, and it's something that we at Doc Edge, it's a big part of our kaupapa, is supporting social justice films and documentaries that address social issues. So I just encourage anybody here who thinks that they've got a project that might be too heavy or too sad or something, like, don't let that put you off, because your passion and your commitment to it is what will cut through and engage audiences.
Yeah, I remember right after I finished pitching, so like I said, I had the benefit of going second to last, so it meant that I could see where everyone else had, the comments that were coming back of, oh, I don't really understand this, or I don't understand where you fit in the story, or like things like that. So I was able to adjust my pitch like I did. But I remember just standing there afterwards, and the first comment was something along the lines of that I was about to have a big career in this. And I remember I just started like welling up, like, what the heck is going on? And then the second comment was, this needs to be a feature film. So I'd pitched a web series, this needs to be a feature film. And I was like, yeah, 90 minutes is very different to like 9. But yeah.
Did you know who any of the panelists were, or did you research them at all?
I researched all of them. Which I think was really important, because afterwards, because of the response to my pitch, everyone was coming up to me and everyone was giving me their cards, and I was able to identify who are the people that could actually help.
No, I think you're understating it a bit. There was a rush for Jazz's project.
So it was really great, because it meant that, there was different people that were coming up to me, and whole bunch of producers and broadcasters and stuff. But because I had done my research on the panelists, I knew I was really overwhelmed at the moment. But when I got back and I had everyone's business cards, I was able to kind of be like, okay, so this person has done this person's done that.
So we're just compiling the panelists for this year's Doc Pitch at the moment. We're going to have the usual suspects, I guess, the Film Commission, NZ On Air, TVNZ, all the local distributors, as well as like the international guests that we bring out for the forum. So we bring out international distributors, international filmmakers, producers, and the panel will be announced probably sometime in April. So I'll talk more about that in the second half.
So I guess after the pitch, my life was kind of like a frenzy. I went straight back. I rang my tutors and I was like, hey, I won. And they were like, oh my gosh, we need to do something. And so I had to go back and, go through all these cards and email everyone and try and start having all these meetings, which Alex Reid had come with me to a whole bunch of them to try find the right production company to go with. So we met with, I think, pretty much every single production company that was at Doc Edge that year. And that's fun. It's the news article that was done about it. And I remember going into all of these meetings, and it could have been really easy for me to just go with the first person because I was really exciting. This whole thing was really new, and I was like, yeah. But it was actually, I think, like the 8th person that I met with that I was like, actually, this is the person that I want to create this project with. And that person was Cass Avery from Augusto. She's the producer of Chasing Great, Richie McCaw's doco, and their production company is amazing. And so we met with her, me and Alex did, and she was like, yep, I'm 100% on board. Let's do this. And then we went back to that one of the first comments on the panel, which was, this needs to be a film. And she was like, okay, we know what the story we think that we're going to tell for the series that you've pitched, but what is the film going to be here? And so they pulled in Leanne Pooley, who some of you may know. She directed Beyond the Edge. She's phenomenal. She's an award-winning director over at TIFF. And so we brought her in just to be like a creative consultant. And so she sat down, and in about 5 minutes, she was like, oh, I know exactly what the film is. And I was like, cool, what is it? And she was like, it's you. And I was like, no. And it took me about like a month, I think, to come around to the idea of it. And then the producers quite literally worked miracles and managed to get the series fully funded by New Zealand On Air and the film fully funded by Film Commission, both with international releases coming out. But this was 2 years ago, and the series actually comes out in 2 weeks.
Cue the trailer.
Yeah. So the first trailer is the series. So this is the one that I originally pitched. The series changed a lot. So it was called Silent Killer, and we were like, that's a bit morbid, so we changed it. And it was also a big fight for about probably 8 months. I really didn't want to be in it, but we realized that there wasn't, the story needed obviously hope in it, and the only way that hope was going to be in it is if I was in it. So I ended up in it, and then the conversations after that was, I don't want my face in it, just my voice. And now my face is the opening shot. So, and the poster for the billboards, which is great fun. But yeah.
So just a little heads up that this is actually still confidential.
Yes, if we can take the live stream. So this trailer goes out internationally on the 4th of March. So we just can't have any filming or anything of it. Thank you. And as an extension of that, so while I was directing this whole thing, Leanne Pauly and Simon Raby's the DOP, he just finished Mortal Engines. Mortal Engines, he worked on Lord of the Rings and stuff. Phenomenal camera guy. They were following me for the last 2 years and created the film, which is now in post-production. They're aiming for Toronto this year, so September this year for TIFF for it to come out. But this was just as a heads up. So this isn't the official trailer. This was the trailer that was done back in 2017. So we filmed for like 2 days. This is what got us the full Film Commission funding.
Yeah, and again, this is not released for the public just yet. So
Yes, this actually will.
looks amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're in post now. That's been cool. I've been able to follow the whole process of me directing the series and all the challenges, because it is the morbid topic, but it's also the topic that we are now only just learning how to talk about. And so there were so many roadblocks, there was so many conversations that we had that was like, I can't put this in the series because this might trigger people, but also this is illegal in our country, so I can't share that, but it's not illegal overseas, which is where it's going to go. And so the film caught all of those kind of conversations, but both of those things, and I guess my last kind of 2 years have all come from the decision to do the doc pitch. I can't imagine what my life would be like now if I did pull out that night. I highly thank my tutor for not letting me pull out. Because life has been, pretty crazy. I've been able to do TED Talks. I've had coffee with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle just down the road. And, all of this stuff within mental health and suicide and Voices of Hope. We've been able to travel and speak in schools and conferences around the globe, shoot campaigns over in America. And so thank you, Doc Edge.
No, well, we're quite proud of the fact that it came from Doc. Well, it kind of came to life at Doc Pitch. So yeah, it's great for us. And thanks for giving such a great pitch.
Oh, thank you for. I'm really. This is, it's a lot better than my 8-minute film that I had in mind for film school. So I'm quite happy.
So just before we wrap up, I thought because Jazz is quite as you've probably seen, she's quite a good public speaker, and pitching, a big part of pitching is public speaking and the actual performance of it. So Jazz has given TED Talks and talks to people all the time in public forums. Have you got any tips for people who maybe aren't confident public speakers, to overcome that?
Yeah, I think that the first thing, I actually said it earlier, was that the biggest key to public speaking is knowing what you're talking about inside and out, because that way it doesn't matter if you stumble, it doesn't matter if you get something wrong. If you know your story and you know your pitch inside and out, then it makes you feel so much more confident, rather than, I don't suggest doing what I did and changing it 5 minutes beforehand. Do not recommend. But knowing everything that you're wanting to say, it allows you to be so much more confident, but also just getting up there and knowing that, the panel know that everyone up there is nervous. Every single person up there is nervous, and just going with as much confidence as you possibly can, trying to know that when you public speak, you speak a lot faster than what you would have prepared. So I don't know if you're doing it again, there's a bell that goes off
Yes.
Yep. So I was the only person to finish smack bam on that bell, and that's probably because I sped talk the whole thing. Don't do that.
But timing is crucial.
Yes, yeah. So practice over and over and over again. Practice with different people. That's what I did when I, doing the workshops and stuff, pitching to people, because your pitch will change 20 times before you do it. You don't want the first version of your pitch to be the one that the panel hears, which is why practicing is so important. And then also just find out whatever way works best for you for public speaking. I personally will go up with bullet points and just speak off that, because I speak a lot more naturally and I don't sound like I'm in a high school kind of speech place. But a lot of people prefer to go up with a word for word pitch. I would personally not recommend doing that, because that if you've got it in front of you, even if you know it off by heart, having the words in front of you, you're going to look down at it the whole time, and you need to engage with the panel. You need to make them feel whatever it is that you're wanting them to feel from your pitch. And so having the way that I tend to do it is in phases. So I'll have my intro. I'll know my intro kind of off by heart. And then, okay, my phase 1 is why I'm telling this story. My phase 2 is this story. My phase 3 is how you can help, or whatever it may be. And if you just know your phases off by heart, and you can have kind of bullet points written down for it, it means that you can communicate a lot easier to the panel, and you're not kind of glued to this sheet of paper.
And also knowing how to speak to your trailer or your supporting material as well, right?
Yeah. They the one that I showed, I didn't actually know at the start that I had to have one in, so that was cut the night before from an interview that I had done, but it was then using it as kind of leverage for why I needed to tell the story and how I could tell the story.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the second half as well, but we do recommend that you have a trailer for your application. But as you saw with Jazz's, it doesn't have to be a neatly succinct, well-composed trailer, but you'd need to have some sort of footage so you can give people a sense of the tone and the style and the genre.
Yeah, I think that the visual material that I use, like I said, it was literally an interview that I did like the month before. But I think my pitch would have been very different without it, because the panel were able to see Jess's parents. They were able to kind of get a feel for the story, and they were emotionally pulled into it. All of the tears happened after they watched that, and I was like, I've got them. And then I could, really kind of hit them with the hook of why they needed to help me do this project.
And what about the feedback process from the panelists? How was that?
To be honest, I don't remember a lot of it, because I was just like, I remember listening to all the other feedback from everyone else, and which is great that there was kind of like constructive criticism for each pitch. But my one, I don't know if they were just being nice because I was young and I was really nervous. But I just kind of felt like I was really cheesy, but kind of felt like I was in one of those like golden buzzer moments on X Factor, and I was just like, I don't even know what to say, because it was great. That's where the feature film idea came in. I really kind of gave me the confidence to be like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. Yeah.
But I would just say to everybody, you need to be prepared for anything in the feedback process,
Yes.
like positive and negative,
Yeah.
and also like panelists just throwing new ideas at you and saying, why aren't you doing it like this?
One of the biggest things that I found from watching everyone else's pitches, the most common thing that the panelists said, and that's why I changed my pitch, was, they had done this whole pitch about what they wanted to do, but they were like, what is the story? What is the actual story that you're telling? And people had great ideas, and the ideas were great, but they never pitched the story. And film, documentary and films are all about storytelling. And so going into your pitch, knowing exactly what your story is vital, because I think that was the most common thing that the panelists were like, I need to know what you're actually wanting to see on screen. Like, what is the story that you're wanting to tell?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jazz.
No worries.
Well, we might throw it open to the audience if anybody has any questions. Any questions for Jazz? We've got a mic. Just one sec.
Hi, just wondering, as you said, normally you get positive, negative comments and then you approach. So did you got any bad criticism about what you're doing that made you like at one point said, oh, probably this really needs to go a different way? Or like, what was the harshest thing that somebody told you, and how did that affect or change your story or your film?
In the actual pitch, there wasn't, for me, there wasn't any harsh comments. And I like I said, I don't know if that's just because of my age or whatever it was, but in the actual process leading up to the pitch, which is where I did the workshops, I remember Paula saying to me, that if you tell the story the way that you've written it, it's not going to work. And I was like, okay. And that's when I was like, well, what do you mean it's not going to work if I tell it like this? And she was like, well, there's no, like, we're not leading up towards an ending of any sort, because she's not here. Jess is no longer here for you to, like, she can't tell the story. So you need to come up with a way to put the story inside of another story, so that you've got a beginning and a middle and an end. Because right now this is like a 2020 news piece. And I was like, okay, so, and that's when the whole thing has changed a lot since my pitch. But pre-pitch, that was probably what it was the story isn't going to hold up in itself with the series. You need to find another way to tell it. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Do we have any questions from the live stream? No? Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, then I think we'll just say thank you so much to Jazz. Thank you for being with us today. Thanks for flying down to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck with everything.
Thank you. And please, everyone, if you're considering pitching, please do it. My life has literally changed because of that one decision to do that pitch. And now, I get to do all these crazy things that I am doing. So yeah, if you're like, oh, I don't know if my story's good enough, or I've never done it before, just do it. Just freaking do it. It's so good.
And I'll talk a little bit about more the development and mentoring process when we come back from the break. And yeah. So thanks, Jazz. Please thank Jazz for us. So we'll just have a quick 10, 15-minute break. So we'll come back at 11 o'clock and we'll have Jess Feast and Jude McLaren with us. Okay, thanks. everybody. Are we on, Jesse? Okay, welcome back. I thought before we get started for the second half, I might show you Jack Nicholls' pitch from 2017. He was the winning pitch that year. It's for She Shears. It was called Number One Stand when he pitched it, but yeah, She Shears came out last year. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but about female sheep shearers. So yeah, this is like Jack's whole pitch, his trailer, and the valuable thing about this thing that I really want to show you is there's also the feedback session from the panelists. So it goes for 15 minutes, and yep, a very valuable 15 minutes. Yeah. Sorry. Oh my God. And it's just crashed my computer. Great. All right. Apologies, people. I think I'm going to go with plan B. Yeah. So I'll introduce Jess Feast and Jude McLaren. So Jess, welcome.
Thanks.
Jess is a filmmaker, development executive. Yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so I've been working in documentary for over 20 years now. That was kind of what I did straight out of university. I studied theatre and then went straight into documentary making, basically, because I sort of, I suppose, fast-tracked that a little because my mum is also a documentary filmmaker, so I was able to work with her in my early years, and worked with Jude quite a lot in our past as well. We were both at the Gibson Group together, where I was documentary development exec, and Jude was many, many things. And yeah, so I guess I worked in television for a long time, and started doing some directing, and then I got quite disillusioned with television, so I ended up going to Berlin, and it was there that I really sort of took the ball by the horns and started to make my own stuff, unfunded, which I think is another kind of aspect of these kinds of discussions, is you've kind of got to have something that goes beyond waiting for permission to do what you want to do. And yeah, so that started a journey for me, which I suppose is just ongoing. I made Cowboys and Communists, my first feature out of that, and then kind of came back, worked for Gibson Group and had a real job for a while, and then did another. I think it takes about 5 years between, I'm realizing, till I forget how hard it is, and then I can start another one. And I did Gardening with Soul after that, so that came out in 2013, so I'm ramping up for the next one now. I'm ready again.
Thanks, Jess.
Oh, crikey.
Jude?
Oh, yeah. So similarly, I had studied theatre and film. I went and did another degree in broadcasting, as you do, because you know, woman, underconfident. You know, got to make sure that I'm actually going to get in the door. Oh, a projection. And worked in regional television, and then actually worked for the Gibson Group for about 13 years, I think, which for my sins. Worked in factual and documentary for about 6 or 7 years, and we went from like one program. I remember we had 1 hour in the first year I worked there, and then by the end of it we had like multiple series, one-offs, you know, all sorts of stuff. So a lot of experience developing factual and documentary, worked in post-production and drama, and then spent 5 years working in development. So again, developing lots and lots of different stories, as well as you know, quite large documentaries, which weren't the ones that we funded that were over $1 million were actually for an educational organisation, New Zealand educational organisation, but also have pitched to the Film Commission, and now have spent the last almost 4 years in talent development with the Film Commission, predominantly in short film, but you know, I do have a love and a passion for documentary, so I guess that's why I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Jude. So Jess, so for those of you that don't know, Jess was our winner last year for the Best Pitch Short, a project called Shot Bro. Could you tell us a little bit about the project, about the story, and how you heard of it, why you decided to pitch it at Doc Pitch?
Great. Yeah, sure. So I'll just sort of start at the beginning. Rob Mukaraka, who is the subject of the film, is someone that I knew of, knew him to say hi to. And my partner, Rob Aotearoa, is also a good friend of his. And it was actually Rob Aotearoa's idea to look at how we could tell Rob Mukaraka's story. There's a lot of Robs and Bobbies in this story, so it gets a bit confusing. And initially, you know, we had a lot of talks about it. For those of you who don't know Rob Mukaraka's story, in short, he is a reasonably well-known actor, and he was sort of in the throes of his career in 2009 when he had a mental breakdown that was kind of a culmination of years of psychological turmoil. And the kind of penultimate event of that was him attempting suicide by cop outside his Point Chevalier home. He dressed in kind of uniform of World War II officer and stepped out of his house with a soup ladle under a tea towel that looked like a weapon. And he'd rung the police and told them and described himself. So he wanted the police to shoot him, basically. So it was a very dramatic event that was televised, and he was shot, and he sort of miraculously survived. And it's been 9 years or 10 years now since that, and through that process of healing, one of the things that he has done is that he created an autobiographical dark comedy show about his experiences, and it's a very vulnerable piece of theatre. It was award-winning. It's an incredible piece of work, and he sort of started off in the sort of normal theatre circuit, but he subsequently really started touring it around the country into little remote marae, into community halls, and he's in this position now where he has literally done hundreds of performances all across the country. And the thing about his show is that he tells his story, and he kind of, in that process, he sort of says, this is me, and in this very, very honest and vulnerable way. And then he asks people in the audience to, afterwards, they have a wānanga that they kind of set up within a kaupapa Māori kind of safety context, where people can stand and speak about their own experiences. And that's just profound, really, because it's a sort of healing process. And so he's listened to thousands of people across the country talk about their mental health and or unhealth, lack of health. And yeah, so that was kind of what we started with. That was what we knew. And it is already, you know, you sort of hear it and it's great. There's something there and you think, wow. But there's so many ways that you can tell that story. And it took us about a year to work through how to do that. Was it going to be a series where we traveled around with him and go to different places? Was it a feature film? What was it? And it really went down quite a lot of pathways and thought about it and spoke to Rob. We went and did some filming. We filmed because I'd never seen the show, so we went to Whangarei with a camera and we filmed the show. We met Rob. I did an initial interview. Still wondering, what is this? Is it? It felt one of the issues that I had with it fundamentally from a narrative point of view was that it's kind of a, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but it's kind of a Sisyphean. Is that the right word? Like it's kind of Sisyphus. It's like, you know, the guy who rows the ball and the ball comes back and he rolls the ball, you know, because there's no end to this journey. You know, he's like on this hero's quest, but there's no ending because he's never going to succeed. He, you know, it's a process. And his actual story is already kind of happened in a way. So those were some of my kind of questions around how to deal with it. And things have changed. You know, it's amazing how when you dive into stuff, how much it can evolve over time. But actually it was the doc pitch that kind of cemented it in my mind, I think. So what had happened is during our trip to Whangarei where we had done the filming of the show, we met a Māori woman who'd got up at the end and she just spoke in this most incredible way about how she had that day hitchhiked from Aotearoa to Whangarei to see Rob's show because she had lost her son 6 months prior to suicide. And she had a whole lot of questions and she sort of wanted answers. And she was looking for something. She was in grief, basically. And she just got up and spoke and she was amazing. She was just amazing, Steffi. And we chatted to her afterwards and, you know, we didn't film her afterwards, but we filmed her during the wānanga. And so I sort of had that held as well, that she was amazing, but, you know, then she was gone. And then it was about 4 or 5 months later when Rob Mukaraka got in touch and said, look, Steffi's invited me to come to the memorial for her son. So, and I'm going to go and do shop bro in Aotearoa for her family. And I was like, oh, there's something in that. Because I think for me, you know, this idea of going town to town to town, while on one level there's a story there, I'm kind of a bit more interested in the deep dive. I don't really want to go over lightly because these are really deep stories. So this was an opportunity and there was an obvious kind of mirroring, you know, here's a Māori man who lived and here's a Māori man who died and there's a representation of the biggest suicide stats in the world right there. So that was, you know, kind of, once I kind of figured out that was the dynamic I was going to follow, then the pitch sort of, then it was like, yep. And I remember the day that I went into Storybox and with Rob, my partner Rob, and Ruth Corver, who is a producer, wonderful producer that I'm working with. She and I was like, guys, I've worked it out. I know what it is. And then I was able to say what it was to them, and they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's the one. And so that was what I pitched.
And in terms of like developing the pitch, did that change over time, or did you have it like set from that moment?
I mean, as I say, because there'd been so much prior thinking, you know, it certainly wasn't the first idea I had about the project. I didn't, and I'd gone, I mean, I think from having years and years of development experience, I kind of know that process. And so I can, and with, you know, Jude, we'll talk about some stuff that we've gone through together, but, you know, I've done that a lot of times. So I kind of understand that process within myself. And I kind of work through it with my mum and Pete Rebecca Kelly, who's a person I call when I want to talk through stuff, and I talk to, you know, so I've got various people who I might try stuff out on. And so I suppose there was quite a lot of pre-development before I actually came to that idea. But by the time I got to that idea, it was like, okay, that's the idea. And then I was able to write it quite easily.
Would you have any advice for someone that maybe doesn't have quite that much amount of experience, but has like a good idea? but doesn't know really the steps to get it to that stage?
Yeah, I think for me, anyway, I think everyone's creative process is different, but for me, I always like to start with a really open, I like to start very open to the possibilities of a story, because I think, especially with that's what I love about documentary. There's just so many ways. There's so many forms within the form. And so I think for me, what do I do? Like, I listen to podcasts about it. I watch films. I gather into my brain, and it's like mulch. And it's like, and I just allow that time for the idea to percolate. I just think you can't rush these things. They just take as long as they take, and they're ready when they're ready. And I mean, I'm sure that that's also maybe difficult when you haven't got experience knowing when are they ready. So I think in that case, maybe if you feel like you've got something you're not quite sure, find someone to talk to about it. I think mentorship and having that, those people, and maybe it's not just one person, because I also think that, different people bring their own preferences, ideas, experiences, taste to that process. So you've got to be careful about how you choose those people as well. So yeah, that's
So like look into their previous works and do your research.
yeah. And I think just part of this whole thing of making films, and part of the thing I love about it is that we are all kind of doing it. It's a very I think, especially in the documentary world, I don't really work in drama, but I've always found it to be a very open community and very generous community. And I think it's really important to tap into that and find the people who you really respond to and admire and befriend them, basically. Yeah.
And so we'll talk a little bit about that later as well, but we're going to be matching people with mentors as well. So when we see the applications, we've got a few mentors confirmed already. So we'll be thinking about, when we see the applications, thinking about who these will be matched with for the mentors. So it's a very important process.
Can I just speak to that a little bit? I do a lot of matching. We created a development lab for short film at the Film Commission, and I do a lot of matching. I match writers and directors with producers, and I also match mentors to teams. And one of the things that I'm always looking for with that is, what are the strengths of the mentors, and what do the teams need to further develop, so that those are aligned. And it's interesting watching the teams, because it's not always what they want to hear. It's often the thing that they don't want to hear, that the mentor just keeps hammering at them. But eventually, that's where the breakthroughs come. And one of the things, you sort of touched on it, Jess, is the length of time that development actually takes. That's a thing that I think that people really underestimate, and they think, and Jazz, I just have to, Jazz, you're awesome. And what you were saying was just so right on. So if this is the first thing you've ever come to, if it's not your first rodeo, it's just kind of like, it's another thing, another reinforcement of emotional engagement being so primary. And also story. That is the most important thing. And that's why that panel of hardened individuals, who often when people say, oh, I've got the story, you just kind of go, oh my God, really? Okay. Because it's unformed, and they're practicing their pitch on you. And that's cool. What I would recommend is that you tend not to practice your pitch on commissioning editors and the Film Commission development execs, okay? Like, practice with your trusted listeners and your producers and people like that who can give you sage advice and help you to, when they don't understand, they're not wrong, okay? They're actually just giving you some really useful feedback about where you need to tweak that pitch. And also the thing that Jazz said, that she knew that pitch inside and out. And so she could, hear the feedback. And that was the other really wise and amazing thing that she did, was she heard everybody else's feedback. And that's the benefit of being a little bit further down the list. And then she went, oh shit, I haven't got it right. It's not going to work. I've got to go out and I've got to get that story in there. The other thing that I heard her do that was really important was she had a proposition for the panel. She said, this is what I want you to do. This is why I'm here. This is what I want you to do, because that actually is a call to action for them to fund. And a lot of people, when they pitch, they kind of go, oh, this is my story, you know, and the end. And that's not the end.
And they think that everybody's going to love it.
Yeah. And, you know, your mother might love it. And there's two things with mothers. They either love it or they hate it. So they're either really supportive or they're devastating. So not to be trusted at either level. You can love your mother, but just let her be your mother, okay?
Except if she's my mother.
Oh, yeah, true. Except if, yeah, Jess is the exception. Unless your mother is, you know, a seasoned documentary maker, then do not trust her. So, yeah, you know, make sure you're practicing. I can't say enough, like practice. And that actually is included in applications, which we'll get onto at a later point.
And we'll talk about our 5-week kind of mentoring process as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just say, actually, another thing about mentors too, which I think, again, you know, Jazz touched on, which was that feedback, slightly brutal feedback that she got, but really she was, you know, robust enough to take it, which was, and I think this is really important for factual storytellers who have done a lot of television or web series. When Paula said to her, it's like a 2020, it's not filmic, it's not a film yet. That is one of the biggest obstacles I see as well, and I've experienced that obstacle. It's taken me years to understand what the damn film commission is talking about, you know, from the practitioner's side to them coming in and actually developing that. But that feedback that she got, she actually, you know, took that and utilised it. And you have to be quite
thick-skinned?
Yeah, well, resilient is actually, you know, the word I was going to use. That's the talent development talk, you know, resilience, that's our buzzword. So you have to know your story. You are the one that knows your story. They're just giving you feedback, and you have to, if you're getting that note consistently, that's when you should be thinking, okay, they really don't understand what I'm saying, or the structure's not working, or whatever it is, and actually utilise that rather than being right. Because you want to be funded, not right. That's the difference.
Very good point.
Yes.
So, Jess, could we maybe like ask you a bit about your prep for the pitch, and like, because
Yeah.
we'll show you a trailer in a minute.
Yeah.
But could you maybe talk us through, like, was the trailer made specifically for Doc Pitch, or did you have it already, or
No.
could?
It was made especially for Doc Pitch, and Andrew, who edited it with me, is here, which is really cool. And it came out of the Whangarei shoot. So we had done a shoot, which obviously is very helpful when you're trying to put together a trailer. Quite hard to do one without any filming having been done.
We were just talking about actually being part way, you know, having some skin in. So we were talking about having some skin in the game before you actually went to pitch. Like, you actually need to have done some research and maybe some shooting, so that you've got material to actually, you know, you really need to know your story. Again, one of the things I see, certainly for short films, is that not enough research is done. People have got an idea, they haven't got a story, they haven't done all that, you know, and Jess talked about giving yourself the space to work things through. There's a usefulness to having a deadline, because it does put light a fire under your butt to get moving and get things sorted. But you also have to it's a kind of a balancing act of having space to let your unconscious mind deal with all the story problems. If you don't have that, you know, that's where your problem solving comes in, is the quiet time. So you've got to kind of have action and also reflection. And I've just lost my train of thought.
Well, we say in our application form, for our call for submissions, that Doc Pitch is aimed at projects in late development or early pre-production.
Great.
For that very reason.
Yeah. So sorry, I've now got my thank you, Rufus. So yeah, it's having that depth of knowledge about your story and experience in your story, rather than it being that's very wise.
Thank you, Jude.
Thank you.
So Jess, did you look into who the panelists were and create your trailer with that audience in mind?
To be honest, no, because one thing I would say about Doc Pitch and what the film is now was a result, in a way, of the discussions and the feedback that I got that day, which is interesting given how, as I say, how many sort of ways I'd explored it. So I pitched this as a short film for Doc Pitch. I pitched it as a 20-minute film. And I think probably there is a 20-minute film that's it's quite simple and it's very contained. But what came out of the feedback session was that there is more to this. There, why are you only limiting it to 20 minutes? And that was I heard that and heard a truth in that. And I also, just in terms of who the interest that was around it that day, from Māori television, for example, I then saw that there was a potential. I think also one of the things I think about with projects is who's the audience and who are you actually, why are you making it and who are you trying to reach? And so for me, the idea of making a TV documentary with it is the right project, because I don't want people to have to pay to go and see this. I don't want it to be lost in film festivals. This is about, it's the same kaupapa as Jazz is working with. This is about suicide prevention. At the bottom line, there is a motivation here that goes beyond my film ego or anything like that. And so in the end, that was really great, because I was like, that is actually exactly where this project belongs. And so it's now bigger.
Did they know about it before Doc Pitch?
No.
Right.
No. Oh, I had had a conversation, a sort of coffee with Kath Graham. And I had had a conversation with Tony Manson. So I had sort of shopped it round in a very kind of quite a loose way. I hadn't gone in with my full like boom. I was more like, hey, and I've got this, because that's the stage that I was at when I was having those meetings. Was I was kind of like, I'm working with Rob and I'm thinking about this thing. And I think probably the reason that didn't ignite at that time was it wasn't ready, in my mind, and they kind of knew that, and that's cool as well, But I also maybe, I also didn't want necessarily for it to be on TVNZ, because I felt like they might want it to be too sensational was my concern, and I really did not want to be under any kind of pressure for that. Yeah.
So was that a benefit of pitching it at Doc Pitch? Was that it kind of solidified the idea for Maori TV as well?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the issue with Māori television is it, in a bit offset to this, but there's a kind of, it's got a relatively small audience, so therefore it's also, we partnered with Spin-Off as well, so that we could bring a bigger and wider audience to it, in terms of, because there's the pitch that you do at Doc Pitch, right, and then there's the actual pitch, which is to New Zealand On Air. So that's the bit where you get the money, if that's the direction that you're going in, and that's a whole other thing.
But it's good for New Zealand On Air to see it at Doc Pitch, right, Benedict? Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Actually, and that's a key word, relationships. And hearing, from Jazz to Jess, like Jazz's relationship was with her tutor. So it doesn't matter at what stage you are in your filmmaking, if you're new to filmmaking or if you're experienced, it's actually leveraging the relationships that you have and trying to find experienced people to give you feedback. So that was really some fortunate kind of mentoring from her South Seas person, was then putting her in touch with Alex Reid, who had that experience, and so on and so forth. And for Jess, it's that she's got existing relationships with commissioning editors. They go way back, and so they can have those kind of like just coffee meetings where it's super relaxed. And I think in terms of pitching, the Doc Edge pitching forum is a little bit different. It's probably more like it's an international pitch, whereas the majority of your pitching is actually over coffee. It is the napkin pitching. It is the hey, I was thinking about this. And then often the commissioning editor goes, oh my God, yes, blah, 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 and they're into it. Or they'll say, oh, actually, we've been thinking we really need an XYZ, if you're lucky.
But like the pitching day, it's actually like a whole day as well. So it's a great networking opportunity.
Yeah.
And like we have lunch together.
Yeah.
We do data doco afterwards, which is like 5-minute speed dating one-on-ones. So you can exchange business cards.
Yeah.
And then we have drinks afterwards.
Yeah,
and so
that's all valuable. And actually, often the drinks afterwards is where you really get some shit sorted. That is where, sorry, my language. Yeah,
it's great. I love it.
From way back. Yeah. But that, and you talk to producers, they always talk about the fact that it's actually at those kinds of functions because people are relaxed, and they're just, and probably they're just a bit more open.
A producer said to me, the first film festival I went to, which was a long time ago, said to me, all the important deals get done between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Yeah. And I've heard that over and over again. And also that, it's not at it's not even at the markets that you do the deals. It's in between them when you're having just, relaxed meetings with people. So it's that, and one of the things I say, because often, we're sort of introverted extroverts. So when you need to, you can turn the light on. It's like, hi.
Yeah.
But actually for the introverted introverts, what you need to remember is that pitching is just having a conversation. And I think that you've got to be who you are. You can't pretend to be someone you're not. And so it's really important to be able to just know what your style is. And if you need to have a quiet conversation with somebody rather than a jazz hands, full noise PowerPoint presentation, then do that. Know that that's the best way for you. And but you've got to pick your moments and be a bit strategic about it, Do not pitch in the toilet. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I
was going to say, the lift, but then I was like, no, the elevator pitch.
No, the lift's
That's
good.
what it's all about.
Yeah. And it has some serendipitous meetings in a lift. Yeah.
I'm wondering, I've got the Shop Bro trailer teed up. Shall I tempt fate and see if we can play
Go
it?
on, give it a crack. Technical difficulties. I was just going to pick up while we we're just doing that. I was just going to say, picking up on what Jazz was saying, just about like knowing that story through and through, and that is what allows you to have those relaxed conversations because you can speak about it from any angle because you understand it because you've done all that thinking. Yeah.
Are we good to go?
I think we are.
Oh, okay. I'll come back. Just remember the word heart. So remind me when we come back.
We've got audio.
They had serious concerns of violence.
Police have shot and wounded a man after a standoff in Auckland this afternoon. Police say they only fired at actor Robert Mokaraka after he came at officers with a meat cleaver in his hand.
And here we are at Whangarei Tom Stadium, New Zealand, and it is absolutely jammed-packed to capacity, and it is full time. 15 points apiece with a kick to come. And up to take that kick is long-serving, legendary All Black, Rob Mokaraka.
I've just been trying to figure out how to say what happened, trying to tell myself so I can tell others. In terms of colonisation, the far north are the most colonised. So we've loss of language, loss of tikanga, a loss of connection to our ancestors, and that makes us fractured. So for me, that's trauma of wairua is passed down through our family. My story is giving permission for others to speak up.
On July 4th, 2017, my son took his life. He gave his mum and his sister a kiss goodbye, and he said he was going for a walk. And he needed one person to give a shit down that day. Just one. Anyone. problem, guys, that we need to do something about. And that trip all the way from Te Puro that I made today was for that purpose. Kia ora.
So I did remember the word heart because I was feeling it. And that's the thing that's watching those clips. And one of the things I've come to realise that the difference for me in developing television and developing film is all about heart. And I never imagined that I would spend a lot of my time with filmmakers talking about getting into their hearts, because that is how you emotionally engage another human being. It's not through it is through your mind and your imagination, you're visualizing that, but that story has to touch people deeply. And I loved what Jess said about, she wants the deep dive, because that's actually what audiences want as well, particularly around grief. We don't talk about grief. And so that it's a catharsis for an audience. It's actually a way of them working through what they need to work through. They need to insert themselves in your story. So if it doesn't touch your friends, if it doesn't touch that panel, it's just not going to touch an audience. It does need to make them laugh and cry, because they're, cathartic things that we need to do as human beings. And it's coming down to those basic things. So it's getting out of your head and into your body and into your heart. And, that sounds like it's a weird thing for New Zealand Film Commission person to say to you, but I truly believe that now. Having gone through, I think we've developed something like 250 films in the last 3 years. So that's become more and more and more obvious. And if something doesn't touch me emotionally, I just have to, no, I'm out. So, yeah.
And I would just add one thing to that, which is I no longer differentiate television and film. Like if I'm making something, whatever you want to call it, if it's a documentary, if it's a film, if it's a video, whatever, it doesn't matter what it's called. I'm always driven by my heart. I would never bother to make anything anymore that doesn't absolutely speak to me, because life's just too short.
Yeah, I think when you're pitching a lot, particularly trying to get broadcasters money, like that's a different proposition, because broadcasters are about reaching an advertising audience, and that takes a different kind of storytelling. I personally believe. I don't know if Benedict would agree with me or not, but yeah, they've got a different lens on things, and it's also about being a trusted provider with a broadcaster. Like you need to have a track record. They will take chances, but in small areas, because they've got a lot at stake. That is. That a lot rides on what their ratings are and their audience engagement, and it's different. But I think in web series and in film, you've just got, that's where the magic is of actually really generating that heartfelt storytelling. And no one knows what works. So that's also a plus and a minus.
So Jess, you mentioned that Maori TV turned it into a one-off documentary, a longer form than a...
Well, just in conversation, the fact that they were interested in that that format, I was like, yeah, absolutely, we can work with that. Yeah.
And what about the other feedback? Did you get any feedback from the international panelists?
I got some. The person I remember speaking was the woman from Canada, who I really connected with. She was cool.
Alicia Smith.
Yeah, she was really great. And
she was from she's a producer from the National Film Board of Canada that we brought out for the forum.
Yeah. I made a really nice connection with her, but she was one of the main people who said, look, it's more than, you can do more than 20 minutes. And of course I do know that. So it was probably slightly, kind of, maybe I was underselling it, but I kind of, yeah, that was one of the best things that came out of it, because it's much better at a 52-minute. And I mean, it's interesting because I'm still considering it. And I sort of knew this because I went down the road. We had an initial meeting with Karen at the Film Commission about this, and we took Robin and I mean, she was into it, but I just, in the end, at that time, I couldn't see the feature 90-minute narrative. In a way now, I can see it more. So now I'm kind of like, okay, maybe now that we've got, and we're embarking on the next, the shooting's about to start for this, and we'll see what happens. If we get some more gold, we've already got some amazing gold, but if we get a lot more, then I'll be looking at it as a feature. And that's also the thing, it's sort of also the film becomes what it wants to be. I mean, Gardening with Soul started off as a short film as well. And I remember Annie Collins saying to me when we had an initial chat about it, and I was pitching it to her, before I'd shot it, I said, it's a short film, and she said to me, this is the editor, if those of you who don't know her, she said to me, yeah, I'll come on board, but you have to shoot it as a feature. And I was thinking, God, I've got one old lady in one place. How the heck can that ever be a 90-minute film? And it is.
She was a damn interesting old lady though, wasn't she?
Yeah.
The other thing too, is you're going to go into doc pitch and pitch, but also, you can have those meetings with broadcaster, with commissioning editors, or with the development execs, and just it's really good for them to know. Like Benedict talked about knowing what's coming down the pipeline. They really like to know that. So it's not a do or die situation. It can be a way of kind of for them to be, you're raising their awareness about it. But having said that, you still want to present yourself really well. You don't want to be thinking out loud in front of them. You want them to think out loud. And that's really great. What you'll know when you've got buy-in from people like that, because they start thinking about the story like they're making it, and they'll give you suggestions and things like that. That's when you've kind of got buying signals or interest. You've got them interested. Not only, when you see them leaning in, that is a good sign. It's a bit overused now, the lean in metaphor. But it is, when people start going, tell me more, that is important.
And I just bringing it back to doc pitch and the bonus of doc pitch. I mean, I was lucky enough when I was living in Europe for a few years to go to a few of those pitching forums, those international pitching forums at EDFA and Australia. I've been, and the great thing about doc pitch is it is modelled on that international model, and it's the only place in New Zealand where you get to experience what that's like. So that thing of trailer, the importance of the trailer, the very strict timekeeping, the table of people, some of whom are not interested and some of whom you are, and knowing who might be interested, all those things that if you wanted to build an international career, that's also really important. Just experience and also just that thing of it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, especially when you're starting out, to get a meeting with a commissioning editor. These are really busy people. So, I mean, I know there's lots of different experience levels in this room, but, the opportunity that you get at doc pitch to actually do it in person, and this is the thing.
Exposure.
It's so much better than, I mean, you can write something in a proposal, and that's a very important art in itself. But to actually be able to front up as yourself and speak from, as the person who's going to make the film with that emotion and that commitment and that enthusiasm and all that stuff, you really want to be doing that face to face. You want, okay, you've got to have a kick-ass backup proposal that comes in after that, but you want to be selling that in person, and this is a chance to do that.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, Jazz felt she was talking fast when she did her presentation. Did you think she was? No. So, your self-perception too about what you do, that's why feedback and practice is really important. I loved that she only had 3 bullet points, and again, I just want to reiterate her feedback in terms of, what she was talking about never put a piece of paper between you and another person. Make sure that you are actually engaging with people and looking them in the eye, and that you are comfortable enough. If you've got nerves, rescue remedy, breathing exercises, whatever gets you through the first few minutes. The first few minutes are the hardest. And if you haven't done public speaking, I used to have a real fear of it. I went and did Toastmasters just for a year, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I highly recommend it.
What is that, Jude?
It's thank you, Rufus. I don't have a commission with Toastmasters, but it is it's an international organisation of learning to speak in public, and they have a great modular system that you can work through, and you get fantastic feedback. And you meet once a week or once a fortnight, and you get time to practice speaking in public and formulating pitches effectively.
Great. Shall I tempt fate and try and play Jack's pitch?
Give it a go.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Jack, I'm the director of Number One Stand. It's a feature-length documentary about female sheep shearers. Our movie is based around the annual Golden Shears Shearing Sports Tournament, and we use it as a jumping off point to follow our characters on the journey. On one level, it's a tournament sports movie, but on a more cinematic level, it's a movie about change and the nature of change in life and how our characters react. We've been filming for over a year now, since the 2016 Golden Shears, and we reckon we have about 85% of the film in the can. We're after post-production financing and distribution. Enough from me, please enjoy our teaser.
It's quite relaxing when you get used to shearing every day. I haven't shorn a sheep for 5 or 6 weeks, dying to get back into it. I love it. Yeah, definitely.
You know, growing up, just seeing my dad shearing, and we went to all the shearing shows, and just seeing them shear, and just something in my blood almost. Just, love sheep.
I think I've always sort of loved shearing. I never thought that I could actually do that. I'm not from a shearing family. Dad would be like, just keep bringing them, just keep hassling. And I'd ring and I'd be in tears. I couldn't get any dagging. No one would let me even dag their sheep. Yeah, there's livestock, there's dead stock. I feel like hardly a farmer.
I got paid for doing sport. In those days, women weren't paid for being competitors.
Wasn't the done thing for a woman back then.
Everybody goes to the Golden Shears. It's when you walk into the hall, there's just something about it, like you have to win there.
Yes. Did you see that pagan remedy from Alexandra?
The guy commented when I was in the senior Golden Shears final that he was glad he didn't make the final because it was better not to have to be potentially getting beaten by a girl in the final.
They don't want to be beaten by you. Boys don't want to be beaten by girls. It's just fact.
I like to beat the boys, really. Yeah.
60 kilo guys and women tipping over 80, 90 kilo sheep. They've got to figure out the technique of doing that rather than brute strength.
Everybody's dream is to make a Golden Shears final and get that black singlet. You only get the black singlets if you make a final.
The manner of winning that show is huge. There's only been so many people win it.
It's just indescribable passion. That if you're a non-shearer, if you don't have that passion, you just sort of shake your head, you don't really understand it.
The rural world is changing rapidly. 30 years ago, women couldn't be shearers, but these days they can. less than a generation ago, you could share sheep, save your pennies, and save up and buy an entry-level farm. But these days, an entry-level working farm is around $10 million. Things like wool prices being low because of cheap synthetic fabrics and the rise of the dairy industry means that the traditional Kiwi sheep shearing shed is rapidly becoming a thing of the past. Our story is centered around 5 female characters, and we follow them into this world. Each of the 5 characters is at a different stage of their life and career, right from a 22-year-old novice all the way up to a 65-year-old former champion. Now, I've given you a handout with a little bit of information about each of our characters, but to give you an idea of just one, let me tell you about a woman called Pagan Remedy. Now, Pagan's really fascinating. She's this ruthlessly ambitious shearing professional. And her emotional story in our movie is really quite gripping. About 7 years ago, she was driving a shearing gang work van to work when she got distracted and crashed. She broke her back, but worse, someone died. She was convicted of careless driving. So she's coming back from this career-defining injury and has been processing that guilt into this fascinating drive to be the greatest shearing professional ever. In our story, the 2017 Golden Shear, she competes despite those setbacks and makes it all the way through the finals and comes third. All of our characters have really interesting personal journeys and within this awesome story world. And the question becomes for all of them is why? Why do this backbreaking hard work? And there's easier ways to make money and more career opportunities elsewhere. And the answer is the same reason why I want to make this movie. I'm obviously a townie through and through. I got drawn into this world because my sister had this decrepit old sheep shed on the farm. I used to go planting them as a kid, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I learned all about this crazy world that has never really been shown on the big screen before. So why do they work that hard when there are easy ways to make money? And the answer I've discovered is passion. They work hard because it's not easy. They work hard because it's rewarding. Hard work is rewarding in itself. We've been shooting this movie for over a year. We've got about 85% can. We're budgeting in total. It costs around about $160,000 to complete. We released that trailer online and immediately built an enormous fan following of 3,700 Facebook likes and counted. Our trailer has been viewed over 68,000 times. It went viral in the rural community, a community we feel is underrepresented on our big screens. We leveraged our popularity into a successful crowdfunding campaign for Boosted, where we raised over $12,000. And the New Zealand Film Commission has generously been supporting our development process. We have a really big audience that we've already mobilised and they're all going to see our movie. There's a saying in sheep shearing sheds called that if you have sheep shit on the brain, you're obsessed with shearing. I know I am, and I reckon our movie will tap into a whole bunch of people out there that are as well. So thank you very much. My name is Jack. I have sheep shit on the brain.
Might just pause it there for a second. What do you think he did well, Jude?
I thought the trailer was good. I think it was too long, but it showed the characters. It had an emotional engagement. It also actually had a really beautiful sort of filmic start to it for me. It was imagery, and I noticed that with Jazz's trailers as well. There's and Jess's work is with Shot Bro. It started with these beautiful images, and so it's intriguing. It's like, what's this going to be like? It looks good. Those were the things I think. So he right up front he said, "This is what I want from you." So even if they weren't listening by the end, they'd heard, "Oh, okay, this is what you need." And then he had a lot of good statistics in terms of audience. He was proving that he knew his audience, he knew where they were, and that they were interested in this story. So that's a really good thing for people to know, that you know who your damn audience is. Those are the good things that I saw.
Anything he could have done better?
I think just in terms of his presentation, he was reading. He's a lovely, lovely guy. Like, I've worked with Jack.
Yeah, he's great.
Also at the Gibson Group. He's great. And he was super nervous. Like, you could just tell that dude was nervous. And sadly, what happens when you're nervous is your energy goes down and you don't engage. And again, it's this open-heartedness. Like, for pitching, the best pitches that I've ever seen actually sometimes are super quiet, but the person is so present and engaged and open, and you can hear a pin drop because they've got the audience in the palm of their hand. And so if you can, and this is the challenge of public presentation. It's about timing. It's about, he ended with a laugh. That was a really good thing to do as well. So, end on a little up. But if you've got to take the people in the audience on an emotional journey with your pitch as well. And I think that's something that Jazz did really well.
Yep.
That's what I would encourage him to work more on.
Yep, great. And you could hear the bells quite clearly there as well. So that can be quite...
Oh, and your heart rate just goes...
Yeah. So that's where preparation and practice and timing all comes into it as well.
Treat it like it's a sport, basically.
Yeah.
You're preparing for your big sports event.
So we'll just show the feedback with the panel as well.
Dale, I saw you laughing a lot. Can I throw that one back to you?
You can. I don't know anything about this because I'm not involved in this area of the Film Commission, so it's quite enlightening for me to see this. It feels very Kiwi. I guess the question is, do you see this playing abroad and how?
Yes, I do. We have a festival strategy in place already. We want to go to festivals around the world that have big sheep shearing in their agricultural sectors, so Canada, England, France, places like that. I've been recently, our Facebook page has been getting a lot of likes from, excuse my cultural ignorance, but from the Middle East, not sure what countries, just because the people and name, liking it. The names and, Sanskrit. I don't know the name of the highways, So yeah, I think it's got a big audience out there.
I just I really think you're limiting yourself. I think it's fantastic. You know what like Starby, just so universal. It was lovely, but really soft walking pictures until you got to the no one likes being beaten by a woman, and you get that really that huge sense of competition. My view would be greater potentially if you set up the, can she win golden cheers and then you tell the backstory. I think it is a universal story.
I'll second to that. I just had a clarifying question. What would be, are you looking for a feature-length series? What is it?
No, it's a feature-length documentary and a festival like that.
Correct.
Thank you. Amy, I think you wanted to I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I've never heard of this, and I didn't know it existed.
Really
it's not a thing in Los Angeles, but so I think it could definitely have appeal beyond just places where people already have been introduced to this. I mean, people love sport and competition, and it's got a natural kind of arc, and it's beautifully shot. And I definitely don't think you should limit yourself in that way at all.
Thank you, Judy. Do you have a question?
No,
back to you.
mine was actually an observation, which is it's all about women. You have one woman on the crew, the producer, and it would be nice to have up here because everybody else is used to here as a bloke. And I just feel that it would open up many more avenues if you included either Georgina, who maybe isn't working here, I don't know, but because people will be asking you when you're going to raise money for that or not. Where is the woman in the team? Because a lot of, I'm only saying this as opposed to television. You're going for a theatrical documentary, the areas and the people that you're actually pitching to, you're limiting yourself by not having a female.
Is Georgina here?
No, she's in Wellington. But I agree with you completely. I was recently lucky enough to go to a Directors and Editing Guild masterclass with a man named Doug Flush. And he made the point that editors are often a second worker in documentaries. And the Film Commission has been working with us to make sure that we have a mentor editor for our main editor, whose name is Richardson, who's female. And we've got our mentor editor is a woman by the name of Kushla Dillon. And she's very strong.
Well, you need to mention that in your pitch because there will be people that was my first response. I looked at that and I went, it's an interesting story, and I agree with everybody that it's really very interesting and universal, but you do limit yourself by not having.
Hold on, Wendy. I'm sorry, Brian, but I've got to let Wendy have this one. Wendy.
Yeah, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I love this movie. I think the international audience is definitely there. The American West, and even you know, film crowds like who love Best in Show and some of the more, the lighter, you know, kind of tonally, it's very serious and extremely cinematic. And I think that's at its soul and its heart is an absolutely beautiful film. But I think it's absolutely going to resonate. And just jumping off of what Julie was talking about, I think in the doc space, there may also be some questions, and I certainly have them, about how distribution of this project is going to benefit the women in the film and in those rural communities. And I'm just wondering what kind of strategies you might be thinking about that, because even though, yes, you're a bloke, you know, representing this film about these women, but I think the way the camera views them is really powerful. And so I'm not taking you to task for that, but I do wonder about your distribution strategies and what kind of impact you might be thinking about as it goes back into their lives.
Yeah, well, we had a great meeting with the Film Commission. I wish that this was my idea, but they came up with it. It was projecting the film on sheep shearing shed walls. So to bring that rural community together to see these women's journeys. And I really like that. So that was one, that's sort of the starting point that we're thinking about.
I encourage you to go deeper.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rudy. Brian, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, the thing for me is, what are the stakes for the women? That was what I wasn't getting from the pitches. I know they're competing. It's not clear exactly what it is. And if you're going to hit into the larger urban audience and say you want that broad appeal, then I need just a little bit in there of the tension of the rivalries between them. And, you know, we can pick our favorites, which is what makes something like Best in Show, if it's a mockumentary, so fun for us, or Spellbound, or those types of films, is we then get to root for and against people.
Thank you, Rudy. Oh, nice one. Rachel, thank you.
I just wondered if you've got the right title.
The right.
Yeah, reading this, looking at number one stand, it took me the whole way through your booklet to get to what on earth the number one stand is. I'm just sitting there thinking, all the people who come from Los Angeles, from Brooklyn, they love this idea. But number one stand's not going to come in.
I agree. It's something that we've been playing with, especially I have a friend who's just saw the film and they made me change the title because it was hard to do. And I think that's a really good point.
I think you're already aware of that. Yeah, I think so, yeah. How are we for time over there?
45.
45 seconds? Anyone want to take those 45 seconds? Thank you.
Have you brainstormed any alternative titles? You want to throw some out?
Share.
Share.
SHEA.
And where does the film start and finish?
So the film starts at the 2016 Golden Cheers, wrapping up the women's different results. And we followed them through the winter seasons, and sharers often go overseas to share. Unfortunately, we haven't had the resources to follow them, and others stay at home. One of our main characters, Hayley, trained all year. She does, you know, things to strengthen her back, and so we followed her through that. And then we build up to the 2017 Golden Cheers and structured the spine of the stories at 2017.
Any last words?
Well, I was going to sort of say this, it's interesting, you know, to the points that have been made about make sure it's competitive, make sure it captures that, that sort of thing for heroes and their villains. And you don't forget to paint those characters.
Yeah. There's this fabulous guy called Godfrey Vine who kind of invented the sharing technique, how you dance around the sheep. And he's like the roughest, manliest, you know, like, man, if ever. You know, like his country colors got a bit of like showing with like bicycles, you know. Yeah, it's that kind of guy in that kind of world. He's passed on, unfortunately, but he's that kind of world that's
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jack.
All right. So I guess what I would just take from that is like you could, again, apologies for the sound quality, but there was some quite confronting feedback there. Julia Overton was saying, like, why don't you have your female producer here pitching? And then Rachel Jean was like, you know, you should change the title. So I would just say to people, like, be prepared for a bit of negative feedback, and it can be like quite confronting.
he seemed to handle that very, very well, and he was obviously well informed. Again, he knew his story inside out, so he didn't get flustered, which was really good. And it was interesting. Brian Glick, who was the dude with the cheese grater, he's a Trump refugee. He's come here to New Zealand to escape Trump, and he was talking about the dramatic conflict of the story. I actually thought that was there. Because it was that whole thing of like, I mean, it was quite simplified, and that's, I thought, was a strength of the pitch reel, was that the guys just don't like to be beaten, you know, and so, but I think it needed to be more strongly set up, but it was there. There's some interesting feedback, you know. The other thing that's really important to know and understand for international audiences is that the Kiwi accent is really difficult to understand. And every time we have international programmers for festivals over, they ask for everything to be
subtitled.
Yeah, subtitled in English so that they can understand what the hell we're saying. You need to actually think about that in your pitch. If you've got an international audience sitting there, your colloquialisms, your Kiwi accent, the speed. So, I mean, you know, Jazz isn't wrong. Like, if you do start to speak quickly, that's why that visual reel is so important. And even thinking about the material you're putting in there, if you've got obviously, if you've got a reel with te reo in it, you want to be making sure that an international audience understands that. And even though it's annoying, it's really important to actually to let people, or get people to understand if there are certain particularly culturally specific aspects that are vital to the story, like a Wairoa. An international producer may not understand what that is, and it's just really important to help people understand in order for your story to be fully comprehended, the depth of that story and the importance, the cultural importance of that story, because that, I do think that often gets literally lost in translation. And stories that have really important cultural significance here are actually important to other audiences, but you have to work quite hard to help them understand that. Yeah.
Great. Any thoughts, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great, I think the strength of it was really in the fact that if you've shot 85% of the film, then you obviously have very rich material for a trailer, and I think they did an amazing job showing just, and that's probably why it was a bit longer. Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, if you've got it, that's really reassuring, obviously, for people to know that it's basically in the can, and yeah.
But you don't have to be that advanced.
I mean, we had hardly, we didn't have much, did we, to work with? And I was just thinking about the Shop Bro trailer. I mean, as I say, I cut that specifically for Doc Pitch. It wasn't a trailer that I was putting out. It wasn't, getting views on Facebook or anything, because it wasn't ready to release in that way. But I really thought about what am I saying in the trailer and what am I backing up. So actually seeing the Shop Bro trailer without the pitch it's not designed for that at all. It was designed because, then straight after it finishes, I tell you who Steffi is and how she fits into the story. And, so I think thinking about how, not doubling up, making sure that your pitch actually works with your trailer. Don't think about them as two separate things. They are part of a whole.
Awesome.
And that is that storytelling aspect of when you're getting in front of an audience, repetition, not good. You're taking them on an emotional journey that has a beginning, and you want to grab them at the beginning, and you want to deepen that emotional engagement, and then you want to leave them with, wanting more, basically. But also, what was really interesting from the panel's feedback is they were trying to clarify certain things. What are you looking for? I think they talked about distribution. So because they were further along, that was part of what they were looking for, was distribution. So there were some questions to.
And how was it going to impact the lives of those female shearers, the subjects?
Yeah, which I thought was a pretty choice question.
Okay, great. Are there any questions? Yes, Have we got the mic, Lindley?
Or do you want this one? Because I've got a megaphone voice.
Can we address the root of all evil? It was mentioned in one stand they'd spent 160 grand. One of the things I get asked quite often is, what's your budget? Well, in business, I've always turned it around. Well, what's the client's budget? And no one seems to give it to me very clearly. And I just wanted to get your input of the expectations. If you're pitching let's say a 10-episode web series, what is the budget that you should be expecting to be working with and asking for, without it being unreasonable, either in too little or too much?
Yeah, I mean, budget questions are always like, how long's a piece of string? Because as you know, you can make things in all kinds of ways. When I'm thinking about budget, I come from two places. The first is the film and the second is the audience. Well, actually three places. So it's the film, the audience, and the mechanism of broadcast or distribution. So I'm thinking about those aspects. There's kind of like a bare minimum of what a film is going to take to make. So that's a component of that. But that has to be aligned with its reach. And, I think every project that I think about, those are the questions that I'm asking. That doesn't give, and then I work with a producer who actually kind of goes through that and can monetize that. But a budget can't be done in isolation by a producer. It has to be a conversation between the producer and the director, because that's an interplay. And so I think it's difficult sort of for me to give a figure. I don't know what it depends what that web series was. It depends what your plans are and whether you can sell that web series on an international level, or whether you've already got a very large YouTube following, so you've got an audience, or so I think you really have to play with those components. And I'm sorry if that's not sort of giving a direct answer, but you can look at what other projects get funded. I mean, New Zealand On Air is very transparent about what money they give for what, so that's a good place to start to see what maybe other similar projects have been given. Yeah.
And budgets can change through the development process.
And they can change. And also, even I was just going to say with ShopBro, I mean, we're in a process now where we've put in a budget and we've got our funding, and now we are reassessing that, because it's like, okay, what do we actually need? And we've still got this amount of money, but within that, there is some flexibility around, okay, well, how much money are we going to put into the reconstructions of the show and those filmic pieces, versus how many days do we need to be out in the field again and go back to Tokoroa? How long is that going to take? So it's a combination of the creative, what you've got, what you're likely to get. You can't just come from one place when you're thinking about a budget.
And for the purposes of doc pitch, like, your budget doesn't have to be exactly precise for the sake of pitching. It's just a solid ballpark figure.
Lucy, sorry, we've got one of my colleagues sitting in the audience. So a first-time documentary maker coming in for funding, who actually gets funding, what's the budget level approximately? Yeah.
Usually the overall budget is just under $1 million.
Yeah.
But the ask is usually around.
Can you just talk into the mic?
Sorry. Usually just under $1 million for the first feature, and that wasn't very nice. Sorry. Approximately there, and for documentary.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Which, coming from television where you had 150,000, that sounds amazing, but it doesn't go far.
It does vary, because every project is so different. It can be, some people come in asking for 200,000, whereas other projects come up to 90% of the budget.
And it is a piece of string, but you need to do your research, and narrative film is called comps, where you go and look at other films and see how much did it cost, what was its box office, blah, blah, blah. And that's part of your audience engagement research that you should be doing, is looking at, films or series or whatever you're making, what's something like mine that's been made in the last 5 years. 5 years is the kind of magic number. And also doing your figures on your, what is it really going to take to make this? And, New Zealand On Air has has capped budget for digital series and various other things. No, you don't? Oh, great. Awesome.
Can we get the mic to Benedict, please?
If you were talking first-time documentary maker, we'd expect it to be whatever the project was. If they didn't have a track record, we'd probably be looking at 170 to 200,000 as the maximum we'd put in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good to know.
And that's whether it's a 1 hour or a web series. We'd kind of keep it at that sort of a level.
So can you just say that again?
So if you don't have a track record as a documentary maker, we're probably going to keep you at between 170 to 200,000, whether it's a TV 1 hour or a web series.
Awesome. Just giving them time to write it down.
Mm.
Yeah. So, these are the things to keep in mind, is that people have, there's caps on funding. So don't go in and ask if you're a first time anything.
For $2 million.
Yeah, when actually what you're going to be likely to get is, several 100,000, that sort of thing. It's cut your suit to fit your cloth. And also it's relative to your experience, it's relative to the story, it's relative to the audience you can reach. Like, if that whole thing about proving your audience, if you can prove, if you've got something that went viral and hit 50 million people, and then you continue to reach that audience, well then, that's a lot more than box office in New Zealand. So you can leverage that and ask for money. So you've got to think strategically about that.
Great. Any more questions?
So we've heard a lot about story, effing story. That's coming through strong.
Yeah.
Let's just say, as first timers, we're not really good at public speaking, budgeting, not good at pitching, but we may have a good story. Has there ever been any exceptions where a story has been identified but it hasn't been told well or pitched well? And has that been developed? Oh, I think mine's gone off.
There's always an exception to the rule, but it's just that road is really hard. And what I always say to people, if you don't have those confidences in those certain areas or experience, then go and get support. Don't decrease the goal, increase the support. Anyone who's come to the development lab is sick of me saying that to them. But that is the key to it, is actually surround yourself. Now, again, going back to Jazz, her tutor, and it's about, anyone that connect yourself to somebody more experienced. If you're not the best person to pitch your story, do it in tandem, get support. Don't have to feel like you have to do it on your own.
And we quite often have teams pitching, producer and director.
But you've just got to know who's doing what and who's going to answer what as well. So you have to probably do more work in some ways if you're going to pitch as a group or as a peer or something like that, because you've got to have greater clarity about who's got the expertise in different areas and who's best at doing what. But the other thing is practice. Practice and feedback. If you're inexperienced but you've got a good idea, get the support and practice and then get the feedback and keep practicing. Increase your timeline. Lots of people have great ideas and they rush at them when they're not ready. And Jess was great at talking about that. It is hard when you're new at things to know when something is undercooked or overcooked, but usually it's always undercooked. So that's the thing, is give yourself plenty of time. You might look at Doc Pitch this year and go, yeah, I really want to do that. You may do it and you might have some big learning experiences, but that's all part of it. And then you go, but actually your timeline might be better for the next year. But the other thing is you only learn by doing in this game. So you've got to do it and kind of have humility around the learning experience. Make sure that you've got good support in terms of you might get some feedback that feels a bit not very good. And I was going to say the S word there, but you know, that and hurts your feelings. But you just have to work through
Resilience.
that. Yes, resilience, efficacy, and resilience.
Any more questions?
I was just going to say also in response to that, you know, I work at Storybox, have Storybox as a company, and and there's, you know, several production companies in New Zealand, and, you know, who are open to hearing ideas from outside directors, and we regularly have people come to us with ideas, and that's one way to do it. I mean, you do have to, again, maybe establish relationships, make sure those people aren't going to steal your ideas. Got to be careful of that. But you know, as I say, I'm you know, usually really kind of happily, I don't know, it's just I notice how generous and good most people are. So yeah.
Can I just speak to that? I'm just a bit afraid of the feedback there,
No,
but
you're right.
I'm all right. Okay, cool. The stealing of ideas aspect as well. I think that, you know, you have to make sure you've done everything you can to kind of, well, you can't copyright an idea, but to just make sure that it's a trusted person that you're going to. But in that, when you're new, you actually kind of have to give something towards that to more experienced people, particularly producers. They actually need to be able to represent your project absolutely. And so that is when you get into a film, it's about they need to be the rights holder, which is a whole different conversation and workshop. But it's important that you're in exchange with them. And so you're new, you're going to learn from them, you know, and they in turn have a project that's got a great story, and they might get that up and you journey together. But sometimes you just have to have a bit of give and take. People get very, very protective and scared, but most of the people that operate continually in this market, if they ripped people off, they just wouldn't do business. That's not to say that, you know, sometimes shonky shit doesn't happen. I mean, things, but yeah, you have to have a level of trust.
I mean, I suppose one of the key ways that you can that you do protect is through access. You know, if you're the person with the access, that's the most valuable thing in a lot of these projects. Not all, but if you've established that and you've got that sorted, then you own that. That's as good as copywriting.
Do you get your subjects to sign confidentiality agreements or anything?
No, it's not. I personally don't, but sorry, but. Obviously you need to know that, you know, they're going to have to sign a consent form. So you do need, and that issues with that over time. But yeah, I mean, how that happens and when that happens, often in my case, that has happened quite late in the piece where they, you know, because it's all about trust in the end. It's all about trust.
Trust and relationships.
Yep.
And that's, the access, and that's what you could see in Jack's story. That's what you can see in your story and Jazz's story. It's about the level of trust, and that's what actually brings the emotion and the intimacy of the story as well. And again, you cannot rush that relationship. So that's why documentaries take such a long time, and there's such a labour of love, because the interpersonal connection that you have to those people, so that they'll trust you with their heart stories. You have to take your time. Yeah.
Sorry, just one more thing on that.
Go for it.
Is just in relation to trailers. I actually think that that's one of the most valuable things you can do in your trailer is show that person fronting up for you in front of the camera, because that is what articulates that level of trust.
Well, that's what we saw in Jazz's footage.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes?
In your trailer, you used what appeared to be real live footage as opposed to a recreation. Can you talk about issues of accessing that footage and the issues that you will have? You know,
Archive footage?
Yeah, where it relates to people like the police or the television station or whomever.
I've just finished a project which has quite a lot of archive in it, so I'm up with the play on archive, and it's I mean, you can get it. It costs a lot of money.
If I could just jump in there for a second, we at Doc Edge actually have an agreement with Getty Images, and Getty Images actually now are the licensees for the whole TVNZ archive and for BBC and for a load of media organisations. And so as part of our partnership, the Doc Pitch finalists developing their trailers will get exclusive and free access to the whole Getty Images archive. So if you are selected, then we can give you some tools to access that kind of footage.
And I mean, to be honest, I just ripped that off the internet because it's not going to broadcast. Yeah, so that's not a problem. But I know when I put it into the film, and it will be in the film, I will have to pay through the nose for that footage. Yeah, and that's in our budget.
Yeah,
because it's not for public consumption.
Yeah, and they've got a deal with Getty Images, who are the rights owners. So that's awesome, and also devastating to hear that Getty Images owns TVNZ stuff. Never mind, I'm so behind.
It's all has to be approved by TVNZ.
Oh, it's okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, because it's all about context, isn't it? Yeah. Do you want to go? We're going to talk about
Should we just
applications?
just talk about timeline and stuff?
Timeline?
Like 5-10 minutes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I just want to tell everybody just a bit about the timeline for Doc Pitch this year. So you can see here that our call for submissions is now open. It closes on Friday, the 29th of March. We will then select 10 up to 15 projects. They will be announced in around about mid-April, which is when we'll also announce the panelists. We will then, so the entry form is just here on our website under industry, Doc Pitch. And then we also have Doc Clinics, which are at today. So we will select the final projects in the middle of April. And then you can see here we have 2 clinics here, that on the 4th and the 18th of May. And they are the closed workshops just for the pitching finalists. And so that's when we'll introduce you to the mentors, and you'll practice your pitches, you'll show us your trailers, you can workshop all your story ideas, think about your audience, and so we'll have those 2 workshops in May. You'll be assigned a mentor, and then the actual pitching forum itself is during our festival on the 7th of June in Auckland at the Ellen Melville Centre. And just by the way, these 2 clinics here will also be in Auckland, and we do require that you attend those. But we may be able to Skype or Zoom you in, but you won't get the same benefit of being in the room. So just bear that in mind, that we do want you in Auckland on those days. And then, the pitching forum itself is on the 7th of June. And so from the 18th of May to the 7th of June, in the lead up to the pitch, you will have like direct contact and support from your mentors. And you can, when you recut your trailer, when you change your pitch, change your story, you can bounce ideas off them. So that they're going to give you like weekly catch-ups to develop that whole story and give that advice.
So how many finalists are there?
Well, up to 15.
Yep.
It'll be between 10 and 15.
Great, 10 and 15. And how many people normally apply?
Last year we had about 30, but
So they're pretty good odds, people.
But
like you should feel like very happy about that.
But we
I'll
want
be going for it.
We want more. So please apply, and please don't.
And it's still good odds, by the way. Even if more people apply, it's much better than short film funding. So go for your life.
And please don't think that like we've said this whole time, please don't think that your application has to be perfect like when you submit it now, because like we were talking about timeline, it is quite a long process that we have, and we're putting our call for submissions earlier this year, so there's more time to develop and work with you and workshop. So if you have any apprehensions about your ideas or anything, like talk to me, contact me, but just go for it, really.
One of the things I would say in terms of that is when you put in your application, if you're at a certain point and there are unknowns, then you would write about, don't pretend they're not there, but actually write about what your plans and contingencies are for those particular aspects of your project. The thing about applications is that when people read them, they can only deal with what they've got in front of them. They won't ring you and there's all this stuff often sitting in your head. And so what again, you need to get people to read your application before you put it in. Often people do really last minute applications, which is understandable, but not the best practice. You actually need to edit and revise your application, get people to give you feedback about it, tell you what they don't understand, but also you've got to think about the questions that might be in the reader's mind, and you have to have your application answer those within the framework. Have you got word limits on your stuff?
Yes, we do. So we have a short description of the project, maximum 50 words, detailed synopsis, 800 to 1,000, and why do you want to make this film, 300 words.
Yeah. And there's a handout that I brought along here. Is that?
Yes, Lindley's got it at the back that we'll give to everybody at the end.
Can you just hoof that up to me? Sorry, because I can't remember it, but I am just going to go over it because these are the things, having spent God knows how many years writing proposals and then reading them, spend the last few years reading them, I've put together this little, these are the things I think that are really important in terms of applications. I've also sent Rufus some stuff, there's some really good reading material around writing proposals and applications. But, you do need to think carefully about how you're presenting yourself in the written word, and it takes a lot of work and preparation. So this is the kind of the best practice stuff. And a lot of the time we find people have got a lot sitting in their heads, they don't get it on the page, or they put too much on the page that we don't need to know. But there are some basic questions about, how are you going to make this? Like lots of people concentrate on the why, but sometimes they also need to know the how. The how is important.
And Jude, I love the question, like, why do you want to make this film? Like the personal connection from the filmmaker to the subject is crucial.
Yeah, it is. And don't be afraid to, go deep on that. Like you can see the strength of Jazz's proposition, her proposal, her story is her personal engagement. And the thing that Jess and I were laughing about before we got up here was that Jess made a documentary, Cowboys and Communists, and I was desperately trying to get her to insert herself in the story. She was very resistant, and I think your voice got into the story in the end, didn't it? But we were, and Jazz had that as well. So that would be one of the things I'd encourage you. If you've got a personal story, like you have to be in the story, and you're just going to have to deal with that. You will weaken your proposition if you don't.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of other quick things I should tell you about Doc Pitch is that we've just signed an agreement with AIDC in Australia, the Australian International Documentary Conference. So we have a reciprocal pitching agreement with them. Alex, our festival director, and I are going over there next week to sit on the pitching assessment panel there. I think Benedict's going to be there as well. So we're looking for projects that have trans-Tasman co-production potential. So if you have some Australian content or an Australian slant to your story, like we'd encourage you to apply, because the representatives from AIDC are going to be at Doc Pitch on the assessment panel as well. We also have a new agreement that started last year with IDFA, and our pitch winner last year, Francis Baker, he went to IDFA in November. He went to a 4-day IDFA Academy, heard from, he's got, I think he got 2 or 3 letters of commitment from, letters of interest from European distributors.
That's great.
Yeah. He went to the IDFA forum. He submitted his pitch to the IDFA pitching forum. There was about, I think, 800 or 1,000 applicants, and he got down to the last 100 or 80 or something like that. But yeah, like his stories of like the networking and getting his project out there, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So
So that's like the #1 documentary festival in the world, if you don't know. The other thing, I'm just putting Rufus on the spot a little bit because I don't know this, but what's the, Doc Pitch has got a really good track record of getting both New Zealand On Air funding and Film Commission funding.
Yep.
So do you have any kind of, the stats on that?
I don't have any stats.
Or, anecdotally, I mean, I know for a fact that they've got a really good flow on anyway, so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, if you look at the recent winners, there's She Shares, there's Tickled, there's Vaya's new film For My Father's Kingdom that just premiered in Berlin. That won Doc Pitch in 2016. There's In the Zone, Robin Patterson's. If you haven't seen that, that's on TVNZ On Demand. I'd highly recommend everybody go and watch that. It's got a really strong social issue message, social change message. Dell, this guy over here, he wasn't going to pitch last year. I had to talk him into submitting his project, and he was completely nervous, didn't want to do it. And then he ended up winning Best TV Series, and it got picked up by TVNZ On Demand, and I think it's going to be on TVNZ On Demand sometime later in the year. So, Vicky Keogh, the factual commissioner from TVNZ, is on the assessment panel. She saw Dell's pitch and just picked it up straight away. So,
yeah, cool. Is there any other application questions? Yes.
Can we get the mic here, please?
Hi. Just to know about in terms of citizenship, do you need to be a New Zealand citizen to apply, or?
You don't need to be a New Zealand citizen to pitch, but you do need to access funding.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it would be an opportunity to get in front of international producers and programmers maybe, but in terms of our funding for the New Zealand Film Commission, you either need to be a resident or a citizen. Yeah.
But we will have producers, distributors, sales agents from Europe and the States and Asia as well. So we actually had a project last year that got picked up by NHK in Japan. Yes, over here, please.
If you have multiple ideas for documentaries, is it better to kind of put your best foot forward and just kind of do one really good application, or is it better to kind of present several ideas?
I would definitely say one.
I mean, maybe the thing is that you kind of sometimes you knock yourself out with the other idea. It's very rare for people to have two really good pitches, and so it takes so much effort to do one. And I think what you'd need to do, if you do feel like you've got a lot of good ideas floating around, you then do that. Do a little bit of market research with people and get some feedback about what is resonating. If you can get that sort of coffee meeting, float it past somebody who might be a decision maker around, if it's a television idea, if it's a web series, or if it's a film, that kind of thing. You want to kind of do a bit of testing before you pour all your energy into it. So, but really, you should be putting your heart and soul into that proposition to go forward, because you want it to be integrated.
But people, when you're networking and chatting to them, they'll always say, what else are you working on?
Yeah.
So it always pays to have those things in your pocket.
Absolutely, I agree. There's two problems. One is that people polish the same thing over and over again, and they don't have enough ideas, or they've got loads of ideas, but they don't actually polish them enough. Yeah.
Any other questions? No?
It's coffee time then.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jess. Thank you, Jude. That was great. Please thank Jess and Jude for us. So just wrapping up, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming. I'd also just like to quickly thank all our supporters and partners, the New Zealand Film Commission, NZ On Air, Film for Change, Aotearoa, and Screen Wellington. So they've helped put all this on. So thanks to them. Thanks for all for coming. Come and introduce yourselves to me if you have any questions. And yeah.